And good morning and welcome to Touch Base Daily. My name is Ron Foster and I'm touching base with you every day except for Saturday and Sundays. So I guess it means just during the weekdays. But I do have my wanderings around the city on Saturdays that I am now going to be filming. So, yes, I am live and it's so good to see everyone. Good morning. Good morning. And what is today? It is spring. It's the first full day of spring. Happy spring to everyone. Spring arrived. I do believe it was 11:20 last night, 11:25, somewhere around there, where if you had an egg, you could balance your egg. And so it was a beautiful, yeah, well, it's been kind of cool here, but it wasn't bad this morning. This morning I went for a nice walk, got my 4 miles in as I try to do, and it was an excellent day. So far, so good. Look, a little slightly overcast here in New York, but definitely good spring weather. Flowers are out, flowers are blooming. Okay, so anyway, today is Touch Base Daily and is our Wisdom Wednesday. As we do on Wednesdays, we have a special guest on, usually that can impact the photography and creative community, or a photographer, which is usually where most of our interviews are from photographers. And so today is a unique one. It is a subject you probably haven't thought about. And that is, let me just get there. Hold on a second. Let me put that in there. Wisdom Wednesday, an insider's view of funeral photography with Duane Knight, which you're probably saying, Ron, funeral photography, that's kind of morbid. What's going on? Are there photographers that do that kind of stuff? Like I always said, folks, there's a genre available for everyone in this field. That's why we should be building community and not trying to fight one another and fight for clients. And believe me, there's enough clients to go around. There's enough genres to build. Okay, I see some folks in the building. Sharon Knight is in the building. Good morning. Good morning. And Kimmy is good in the building. And Chrissy Corners is in the building. Let's see who's in the building on the Instagram. Instagram is quiet. Ooh, Instagram is quiet. I guess everyone's got the memo to be at our Touch Base Daily here on YouTube for a much better experience, and you get to see us clearly. So you're probably saying, why? We're just gonna go dive right into it because this is a fascinating subject, and Duane is an amazing brother. First of all, I met Duane years ago when I was working at the Container Store. I was on a ladder or fixing something or stocking shelves or doing something. I don't know what I was doing. But in was this gentleman asking for storage and for his photography. And we just ended up talking. At that time, I was not a professional photographer. And we got into this interesting conversation. He told me what kind of photography he did. I was totally fascinated from that moment. I had never heard of anyone doing funeral photography. And then I did my research because of him way back then, that there was a time where that was truly the popular norm. Can I say the popular norm? During the 1800s, I think it's 1834, was the beginning of photography for funerals. And it was very big. And then it was Queen Victoria that gave it even more notoriety. So during what we call the Victorian period of our in the world history, and it was common for everyone to have a funeral photographer come in and photograph their deceased. And it's not like our world today. Today, our world has a strange connection to death. It's just the way our world is today. However, during the years of the late 1700s, the 1800s, the early 1900s, death was everywhere. As you further back you went, the more death there was. And so people were very comfortable with death. They were comfortable. It was something that they dealt with all the time. Children dying, parents dying, disease, war. It was common. So a lot of folks in that period always wanted to have photos of their deceased loved ones that they can save and preserve through family history. It was big. It was huge. I often talk about how people, they get an icky feeling when they go past a graveyard. But back in the 1800s, the graveyard was the public park. The graveyard was the public park. Before there was a Prospect Park, before there was a Central Park, folks hung out at Greenwood Cemetery here in Brooklyn. And all the Woodlawn and all the other cemeteries in New York and wherever you were, the cemetery was the gathering place for family gatherings, picnics, and all the other stuff. So people were very comfortable with death back in the old days. So Duane Knight, I'm going to bring him up in a moment because I want you to meet this gentleman because I am totally fascinated by the genre. I actually did a funeral. I photographed a funeral in 2018, and it was my first time doing it. And I immediately thought about Duane. I'm meeting him years before that, and we reconnected. So anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to bring Duane Knight on now. Welcome, Mr. Duane Knight.
Yes. Hey, Brother Ron. Good morning. Good morning. Good wonderful Wednesday morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you, brother?
Man, I'm beautiful and blessed, taking it one moment at a time.
So now here's a question. Well, I always we ask a certain question here when we
Okay.
first start out. So I'll go straight to it. Um, if you were stranded on an island, what food item must you have?
Seafood. I love seafood. I love
What
seafood,
kind
so
of
that's an
seafood?
easy one.
What kind of
What's
seafood?
shrimp, my porgies. I love my porgies, even with the bones. Of course, some lobster and crab. So any kind of seafood, I'm good with. I'm good.
And my next question is going to be: share 3 fun facts about you.
One, I can be silly. I can be silly. Two, I try to be a comedian sometimes. Other than that, I believe I'm a fun person to be around.
Wow. That's it in the shell. It's just that as a sweet blanket over that you're just cool. You're just a cool person.
I'm just a humble servant of the Lord, as I always say. But I just try to be fun. I try to have fun in everything that I do, even when I wasn't working. Even when I wasn't doing this full time, I always had a motto when I worked 9 to 5. If I stop having fun, I'm quitting, and
Mm.
that's what I did. So as long as I'm having fun and being a good servant to the people, I'm good, Ron. I'm good.
Oh wow. I love it. I love it. I love it. So now how did you what was well first of all, this how did you start how did you get into photography? When was the first time you said, you know what, I'm going to and you picked up a camera and you said, you know what, I really love doing this thing called photography.
Well, I've always been a creative. I went to high school for art. I went to college and I studied film, animation,
Mm.
and photography there. And then when I got a job at the gospel radio station in New York City, WWRL. It used to be an AM station. And
Mm.
when we did the events, I met this photographer. His name was Colin. Um, and I just liked the way he shot. I just liked his eye. Um, and so at one point I approached him and said, "Hey, can you teach me photography?" And that was in 1995. And it just so happened, as God would have it, he was selling his equipment to upgrade, and so I bought his equipment was Nikon, and he mentored me. I had a photographer in my church. He mentored me also, and then I met another photographer by the name of Chris, and he mentored me. So since 1995, I was shooting primarily gospel music, and I still like gospel music because one of my other hats I became as a DJ. I went gospel DJ. I went into gospel radio, and being in gospel radio, I followed the Gospel Music Workshop of America from city to city. And so when we had our conventions, I would find opportunities to shoot the different gospel artists there. So that's primarily what I started doing: shooting concerts, shooting CD release parties. I had a privilege of doing a couple album covers. So that's where it's all started in 1995, doing shooting gospel music while on gospel radio, which I still am, um, with my Nikon cameras.
Wow. Wow. And so now, how did you make that transition from being gospel? Because you are a gospel DJ. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
gospel DJ, gospel radio announcer, and photographer. Those are my three hats.
Wow. And so before we go into the funeral thing, I'm curious, what what also caused you to be a DJ? Well, I mean, again, these are all you have this photography going on. You're a DJ, and you're still a DJ to this day, and
Right.
a very well-known DJ in the gospel world. So how did that unravel? Or I should say, became something big with you.
One thing about my life, which I noticed, is that being a Christian, you always ask the Lord for leadership and to guide you. And so God has always used me as a pioneer to do things that normally was not the norm, I should say. So, as everyone know, um, the hip hop movement started in 1973 with Cool DJ Herc up in the Boogie Down Bronx, and it's expanded from there. So, as the DJ and hip hop started going to the five boroughs, being in Brooklyn, I lived next to a DJ. My sister dated a DJ, and DJs was all around. So, and that was 1973. So in 1975, when I was part of a youth program at Miller Memorial Church of the Nazarene, a couple of brothers, we got together, it was six of us, and we noticed that radio didn't play all of the gospel music that was out there. So as
Mm,
music started expanding, and Christians wanted that same kind of music. So
mhm,
we found that there was Christian hip hop out there, Christian reggae, calypso, jazz, those kind of genres that radio wasn't playing. So what we decided to do was to get together as a group called the Gospel DJs, and the six of us, we will minister through song. We do
mhm,
many skits, and plus we would DJ. And for the young people, we will make mixtapes, because that was a thing of the 70s, doing mixtapes, and we would give those out to young people with the new genres of gospel music that we found out there. And so
mm,
that's what we started ministering to the young people, to the church. And once the church found out that there was gospel DJs out there, they started calling us for everything, because before they would call the DJs was out there, but they didn't know gospel music. And so if like when we started doing the Empire roller rink, skating rink,
Oh,
skating party,
Empire. Oh,
yeah,
I remember Empire.
we started doing their gospel night, and normally what a church would do was bring the music, give it to the DJ, and tell the DJ what songs to play because the DJ didn't know them. So when we came on the scene in 1975, they called us because we knew the music, we had the music, and we knew how to mix the music. So we brought
Mm,
a whole new life into the gospel skating parties, to the weddings, to the block parties, um, all kind of events that the church had, the Christian community had, because we were Christians, we knew the music, and they didn't have to tell us the music. We knew it, so we knew how to minister through the music and stuff like that. So that started in 1975, and um, praise the Lord. Next year I'll celebrate 50 years of being a gospel DJ.
wow.
So it's a long story with that. We created the first. I partnered with two people, DJ Lace from the Bronx and
Mhm.
Sherry from Philly. We did the first Christian DJ record pool, first Christian DJ convention. So God has used me in that area, and the same thing. And because the next question is about the funeral photography, um, that's how I got into funeral photography. Being a photographer since
Ah.
'95 Been a photographer since 95. In 2008, 2010, my favorite uncle passed away. And
Mhm.
so what I did, I just asked my aunt if I can shoot it for her and create a book and give it to her because I love doing books. So when I did
Mhm.
that, and she's looking through the books, she looks at me, she said, I don't remember half these people being there. And these are my coworkers. I didn't know they came.
Wow.
So that's when the light bulb went off in my head. While saying that, wow, if she doesn't remember who was there, how many other families that are grieving sitting in that front row don't remember
Mm.
half the stuff that goes on? And so since 2010, we investigated and started um, finding out about funeral photography, and we've been doing it since then, since 2010. But that's how I got
Wow.
into it, and that's still, like you said, we'll unfold that a little more. But that's how I got into it.
There are not a lot. And for those that have questions, please put a star or something or put a question first, and then put your question, so that way I can star it and then put it inside the for our Q&A time. But my question, because back in the day, I did studies on this type of photography, because one is I had to, in 2018, one of my friends, his mom passed away, a good buddy of mine, and he says, "Ron, will you photograph our family's mom's funeral?"
Right.
And it was the first time I had ever had that request. I had never photographed a funeral. First of all, I didn't know people did it, until I realized that a lot of my friends from Africa did do it. Like mostly my Nigerian friends, they photograph a lot of their funerals, and same thing with Ghana and some of my friends overseas. So I got a chance to do it, and so I did my research. So, but I went, what? I mean, you're in this. This is what you do. What is a funeral? What would you say is all the characteristics of a funeral photography, or funeral photography specialist? Because that's what you're doing. You're specializing in a niche that is
Yeah.
for people grieving.
That's a good question. People have to realize that funerals are life events, just
Mm,
like a wedding, a birthday party, christening. A funeral is a life event. The only thing, the only difference is that a lot of people don't see it as that, and they see it as more, like you said earlier, taboo and stuff like that. So you don't get a lot of people requesting funerals anymore, like you said, since the 1900s. Funeral photography is the second oldest genre of photography. In the
Yes.
1900s, when in the Victorian age, families, when a loved one passed away, the families would get an artist, a painter, to come in and paint a family portrait with the deceased person. So that
Mm-hmm.
way, when other family members came around and traveled to visit, they would have a picture of them with the deceased person that they can show them. This is your cousin, whatever the story might be. So in the 1800s, when photography started, what people started doing was calling on the photographer. And the
Mm.
photographer would take that family portrait of the family with the deceased person. So they saw the uses of photography in the 1800s, but it wasn't until like the late 1900s where that whole shift changed, and when photography became more Polaroid, less and less people started shooting funerals, and they just
Mm.
focus on the other events of life or life events. So
Mm.
photography is like I said, is the second oldest genre of photography. And we're there's not a lot of us around the world. I think there's less than 50 around the whole world.
Mm.
I got a friend of mine, John. He's in Australia. I ran into, I read about a photographer in Singapore, in England. In the United States, I ran across 5 funeral photographers, 2 in Baltimore, one was in Virginia, and John, he came over from Australia, and we had a meeting one time
Mm.
doing the photography event in New York City. But that was the first time I met other funeral photographers or people who wanted to do funeral photography. And again, there's a difference between a photographer, a good photographer like yourself, who can shoot a funeral, and a person that shoots funeral as a specialty. Just like there's a
Mm-hmm.
difference of a wedding photographer and a photographer that can shoot weddings. There's a big difference. There's a big
Yes. Yes.
difference. And so with me, I specialize in shooting funerals, and the same like a wedding photographer or headshot photographer or boudoir photographer. There's certain skills that you need to understand to do your job well. There's certain interactions with the people you need to do to know about to do your job well, and you understand more than just a great photographer. You understand more about what your client needs than somebody who just comes in and they're good and they just shoot a funeral right off the cuff.
Now I'm looking at your Instagram page, and I mean,
Yeah,
you have done not only have you done traditional. I mean, people would say, oh, he's an African American gentleman. He probably does African American funerals, maybe a couple of American funerals. But you have
mm,
a lot of like this one. I do believe is a Korean. Is this
right,
Korean? I think it's a Korean funeral
right.
you've done. You've done a couple of
Korean
Buddhist
funeral, and that
funerals.
yeah, it was definitely um, one of the things I really want to do. And shooting funerals is definitely a cultural thing. Some cultures don't like it; they don't want any. They have a certain taboo about shooting funerals. So funerals on a scale of 1 to 10 people, you might get 2 or 3 people that want it. It's not something that's everybody wants, and I have to understand that. I've learned to understand that, but I just want to be there for the people who do want it. For the few families that do want funeral photography, I just want to be there for them because again, it goes back to the point that most grieving families sitting in the front row do not remember half the stuff that goes on. So one of our mottos is that we help grieving families remember half of what they forgot and all of which they never saw.
Mm.
And when we deliver the books, we put everything in albums. That's our thing. We give them digitals, but we go the extra mile and we create legacy books. And in
Mm.
our legacy books, on it, 12 by 12, like a wedding album. It looks like
Mm-hmm.
it's in the shape of a wedding album.
Mm-hmm.
It's 12 by 12. All our books are 12 by 12, professionally done, like you would do a wedding album. And we tell the complete story of the event, of the funeral, because a lot of times family members cannot make the funeral, especially if they're overseas and stuff like that. So we've had occasions where family members could not make the funeral because they were sick overseas or something like that. And so we create the books to tell a complete story from A to Z, so that at a certain point, even other family members can order the albums. We call them legacy books, and they can see everything that went on from the program to the speaker to the hugs to the processional, the recessional, the burial. We and even sometimes they hire us to do the repast. We can do a repast. We can do the viewing, the homegoing service, the burial, and the repast. We can do all or just part of it. But all of that is put in a legacy book, and you probably have a picture of somebody with a legacy book. Um, and that way, families at a later time can go back and see all the acts and loves of kindness and compassion that people come, or people who came to support them. Because a lot of times that's example of one of the legacy books. There, that's the one we put in the VIP case, and it's like I said, it's 12 by 12, professionally done. And that's another one we did for a mother of a police officer. Um, and so we give these. That's Mr. Sampson. Hey, Mr. Sampson. That's the my main funeral director that uses me all the time up here.
Mm.
And that was a book of a mother that passed away, a bishop that passed away, and later on they can go back and look through these books and see everything that happened at the funeral. Because most of the
Wow.
time remember, they don't remember. And we were happy to say that this year we celebrated over 100, and that's a small number to some, but for a funeral photographer, we've done over 100 legacy books for families over the last 10 years, and we're looking to do more as we God continue to use us in funeral photography.
It's interesting. One of the things you bring up, and I know, and I when I was doing my photography, that like I said, I've only done it once, and and what was really fascinating is you have a point here, because people, when they're grieving, they can't remember all that's happening.
Nope.
You know, they don't know who, like you said, they didn't know who attended the funeral. They
Yep.
don't know who's interacting with different people. They don't know. They're in a state of grieving, so they don't really get to see what's happening. But
Right.
then, and over time, they're able to go back and say, you know what, I want to look at this. I want to feel what happened at my loved one's funeral. Um,
Correct.
you have this saying, and I want to you say in your
Yeah.
brochure and your website, it says, how do you help grieving families heal through the art of photography? So I mean, you pretty much touched on it, but
Again, as photographers, we know it's an art. We know that
right.
photography is an art. When you do it right, when you do it professional, not just professional. Photography is an art when you learn to do it correctly. And so, what we do again with our photographs, with the images we create, we give a family an opportunity to go back and see all the acts of compassion that
Mm,
people came and bestowed upon them. Because I found out that more people would come to a repast, would press their way to a repast than they would to a wedding. If they can't make a wedding, they'll send a gift and that kind of stuff. But a funeral is more final, and people want to be there to support that person, that loved
mm,
one, that wife, whoever. They want to be there in person, and so that's why repasses are like the closest thing to a family reunion, because
Yeah.
you get to travel further and more just to be there. And I shot a funeral once for one of the families in my church, and they had about 15 people came that they graduated high school together. And
Wow.
the gentleman, he was like 80 some years old when he passed. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a long time since they saw each other. So with the wife, we took a picture of the wife with 15 other classmates from high school.
Wow.
And you don't get that. You don't get those opportunities very often. But at funerals or repasts, those are the kind of opportunities that you get. I shot a funeral for a good friend of mine that I graduated college with. His dad passed away, and we created a book for his mom. And when
Mm-hmm.
I gave her the book, she would flip through the book, a couple pages, and then she would hold the book to her bosom, and she started crying. She would flip a little more, and she started crying. And she got to a point that she called me over. She said, "See this picture here? This is the only picture I have with my cousin, and he
Wow.
passed 2 weeks ago. And
Wow.
this is the only picture that I have." So those moments like that make this the healing for grieving families
Mm.
possible, because they see the love, they see the legacy, they see the camaraderie of people who came out to support them, to show loves on them. In our legacy books, we have at least two pages, two spreads of hugs, nothing but hugs, because they get so many hugs from so many people and they don't remember them. But we have
Wow.
at least two pairs of hugs in every book. So it's so much that they don't see. Like wedding photographers, we start from the outside. We
Right.
take a picture outside the venue, whether it's a church or a funeral home. We start from pictures from the outside. We go inside. We take pictures of people signing the book. That's only 2 pages. We do the flowers. We do the cards. All of that stuff.
Wow.
It's in the book. Then we do another page or two of just the setup, the layout of the deceased person by themselves. If it's in the church or the funeral home, you get the spread, you get the flowers, you get all of that in the book. And then we go into the processional, and then we go into the viewing. And it's just so much to shoot if you know what you're looking for. Just like I said, wedding specialists, they know, and they get those shots that even a good photographer who just shoots wedding don't get, because we have a different understanding, we have a different mindset of what we go in for.
So I have a question. I have another question. And if if there was a young person today, I mean, again, someone's going to see this video, someone's going to see this on YouTube, someone may, search out funeral photography.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to someone now that you had this experience? You've dived into all of this, delved into it.
Mm-hmm.
What three recommendations would you give to a young person or any person that wants to go into this genre of photography?
I thank you for that question. It's a good question, and that leads me to one of my goals at this point in life. I want to teach this thing. I want to
Mm,
start having classes to teach funeral photography. I just had the experience of coming from Vegas for WPPI a couple of weeks ago, and I had my hat on. I love funeral photography, and I got a lot of people stop me in the hall and they ask about funeral photography. Some people like yourself, they shot one, but they really didn't know everything to do on it. But there's certain things that you got to do or you should do when you're shooting a funeral. You ask for three, there's a whole lot. My number one rule: you cannot use flash. You
mhm.
cannot use flash shooting a funeral. At the repast, yes, but during the viewing, the service, and even the burial, you do not use flash. That's number one. Number two, you have what I do. One of the things I do, I let the audience see me interact with the family. I go up there, I talk with the family and that kind of stuff, so that people in the room can see, okay, the family knows he's here. He's talking with the family, so it's okay that he's here.
Yeah.
Because a lot of time, you and it's funny, you go to shoot somebody at a funeral and they give you that look. Don't you take that picture. you know,
Yes.
but you got to know how to do it. And another thing I would say, you got to know when to shoot and when not to shoot. You have to know when to shoot and when not to shoot. Because number one, you have to remember that you're hired by the family to get certain shots.
Yes.
So you have to get those shots. There's been times I've had police officers, pastors, different family members come up and want to stop me from shooting. And I would have to say, the family knows I'm here. If you have a problem, please go talk to the family. And
Right.
when those times they do, the family straighten it all out, because there's certain shots you have to get. And then there's certain times, even when the families are grieving, when they might be at the casket and they're grieving, you got to get certain shots in class and art. Then you got to put the camera down and let the families grieve. Because they don't need a camera in their face the whole time they're grieving. You look, you get your shots, and then you put your camera down and you let the families grieve. So there's a certain way that you have to shoot a funeral. You have to know how to move around. I like to say I'm in Steph mode. I like to move around and people don't know that I'm there. And I had the opportunity. One time I shot a funeral for a lady. Funny story. I did a exhibit at one of the communities. Borough, I can't think of what they are, but they had a fair, and I had a table with my stuff on it, and this lady walked by, and I said, "Miss, can I show you my book?" So she saw funeral photography. She said, "No, I don't want to see that. Get that away from me." So I said, "I tell you what, let me show you one picture, and if you don't like the one picture, I'll close the book and I won't bother you." And she stood there like, I don't know. So I opened the book. I showed her one picture. So she's looking at it. So now I said, "I got you now. I got you." I showed her another picture. She's still there. I showed her another picture. She said, "This is not what I thought." I said, "Absolutely. Most people do not understand, do not comprehend, do not get what I do until they see a book. It's not even just my images on the web. And those are I thank God those are good. But people don't get what I do until they see one of our legacy albums. And that goes for everybody. I've never met somebody who I can sit there and tell them what I did who got it until they saw one of the books. But that lady, I went on to shoot her mother's funeral, her father's funeral, and her husband's mother funeral.
Wow.
Not one family. So it was but I brought her up because when I shot her mother's funeral it was a Catholic church, and later on I gave her the pictures. They get pictures on a USB with the family, the deceased person's name on it, the loved one's name on it, a USB, and plus they get the album. So from the USB, she gave the priest some of the pictures, and the priest told her, "I didn't know you had a photographer there. I didn't see him." And I was like one of the highest compliments that I could ever get, And I try to Steph mode that you move without people noticing you. You know what to get. You know how the services are gonna proceed, so you know what positions you need to be in before certain things happen. You know your shots that you want to get. So you just is like any other genre of photography. You have to know your skill to get the shots that you want for the family.
Okay, so now in all of this, you're a photographer. You also do you do a lot of other photography as well. You do funeral photography, but you also do concerts,
Yeah.
right? So,
That comes from, like I said, in '95 when I started traveling with the Gospel Music Workshop of America as a radio announcer. A lot of the gospel artists would come there for the radio announcers, and they would do concerts and CD release parties and stuff like that. And so I fell in love with shooting live music. Live music. So the pictures you're looking there was I took a workshop with David Breland. He's the the tour photographer for Luke Combs. And what he would do is he was allowed to have workshops at the actual concerts. And he would take like 5 or 6 people per concert and train us to shoot a live concert, a tour. I've done that for 3 years. I've shot on Madison Square Garden. I shot the North Carolina Arena, and I shot in Detroit at the Lions Stadium. Oh, that was real fun shooting at a real football stadium, and you shoot the whole concert. And these are some of the pictures that I took at those concerts. So, along with my love for funeral photography, my second love is shooting live concerts. I love shooting live concerts. And my third love is shooting ordinations. I like shooting when people get ordained as ministers, as bishops, when they get elevated as pastors and stuff like that with the whole garments and that kind of stuff. I love shooting those too. So those are my 3 loves. That's my nephew. That's my nephew. Um, as it would happen, that's a funny story. I was shooting this particular funeral right here, and he does dub releases. His dad did it, and now he's taking over the business. He does dub releases. So not knowing, we both wind up at the same funeral. So I'm shooting, and he does a dub release. So before he did the dub release, I took this shot to commemorate, a family affair that both of us are out there serving grieving families, and that's where this picture comes from. My camera with his doves. So
I have a question. I don't know,
it was a funny day.
Duane, doves being
Yes,
released,
yes,
do they come back?
yeah.
Or do they're trained to come back, right? They don't just get
Doves are
released and
trained to
then
come
they're
back.
gone.
So they're
Gotcha.
trained to come back to the coop.
Gotcha.
And for the most part, most doves make it back. Most doves
Mm.
make it back. Some doves, sometimes they do get lost and they wind up in somebody else's coop. And then again, as my nephew tells me, there's also birds out there, hawks and other things that attack doves. So, but for the most part, doves
They
have
make
a
it back.
radar and they know how to get to the coop.
Okay.
But I get that
Guys,
question all the time.
I was like, finally, I have someone to ask that question. I've had
Yeah,
that question in my
he
head
gets that question all
for
the time.
ages.
Yeah, doves do
Uh,
come back to the coop. Yeah.
oh wow. Okay, so when doves cry, no, sorry, that was a bad joke. When the falcons get them. So now, if anyone has any
Right.
questions, this is the time to put your questions in Q&A. If you have any questions, I see there's one question here that I'm going to give. Then Adrian, my son, says, let me just pop this screen off here. Uh, is a
Okay.
photographer's eye something you can learn, or does it need to be a talent you are born with, but not yet tapped into?
That's a good question. Thank you for that, Adrian. I say it's both. And that goes for photography straight across the board. Photography is something that you can learn. You can develop your eye, and you do develop your eye the more you shoot. I used to teach. I had the privilege of teaching 6th and 7th graders at the YMCA a couple of years ago, and I would tell them, once you get your camera, go out and shoot, 1,000 pictures. Just shoot
Mm.
1,000 pictures, because that's the only way you can train your eyes, by shooting. So shooting a lot trains your eye. Um, Learning the art of photography trains your eye. And then some of us, no matter what genre, it could be singing, it could be painting, it could be photography. Some of us have a natural ability to do those things.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a combination of both, but it can be learned. And like I said, some of us are born with the gift of certain things, and for me, like I said in the beginning, I've always had a creative eye. I started drawing when I was young. I went to a high school art and design for art, and then I went to college for photography and film. So I've always had that creative eye. But yes, Adrian, it can be learned also.
Any other questions out there? Any other questions out there? Okay. So speaking of, I know that shooting is definitely the way to learn. I mean, it is the really the only way to learn. It's like you're out there, you're doing it constantly, constantly working on your skills. Um,
That's right. That's right.
who inspires you? Who is someone that inspires your photography?
Okay. I have two. Well, like I told you before, I had a gentleman at the radio station that he was one of my first mentors, and a gentleman in my church, he was one of my first mentors too. But when it came to photography, I met a gentleman at one of the large convention. His name is Chris Gill, and he comes from a whole line of photographers. And
Mm.
Chris inspires me because Chris was the first black photographer that I saw that was sponsored by a camera company, and he worked for Fuji. And when I
Ah,
went through these conventions and I saw all these great photographers teaching, I never saw a black one until I met Chris Gill, and he was a Fuji representative, and I befriended him. And up until this day, he still mentors me. He still mentors me. But when it came to funeral photographer, there wasn't many photographers out there that did it. The main gentleman that I found was a gentleman that did the Harlem Renaissance. He's known for the Harlem Renaissance, and that's James Vantezy. James Vantezy. He's known for the Harlem Renaissance. But if you study his work, and he's a beautiful, beautiful photographer of the Harlem Renaissance, he also shot funerals. He also shot funerals. So because of him, yeah, that's the picture of the young James Vandersee. But because of him, I looked at some of the funerals he shot, and that also inspired me that okay, he did it, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to become known for doing funeral photography just as much as he's become known as doing the Harlem Renaissance. If
wow.
anything, I want to be known as the pioneer, one of the pioneers of funeral photography. So that's why I promote myself as a funeral photographer, so that people know. And people, I get the same reaction all the time. I've never met a funeral photographer, and I was nice to meet you. First time, nice to meet you. That kind of stuff. But that's what I want to be known for.
Wow. I've
Photography.
only, like I said, I've only in my life have met two.
Okay.
Yourself, and I think I don't know where I was. I don't know. Maybe it was at one of these expos,
Mhm.
and I think it was a woman. It wasn't even a gentleman. It was a woman, and she said she did funeral photography, and I was like, I only know one photographer that's a funeral photographer, and that was Duane from years ago that I met years back, and so well, this
There
was
are
good.
people
I mean, as we close out,
there
um,
are other photographers out that are out there
uh-huh.
that does it. Um, I don't know if they promote themselves as funeral photographers like I do. That's why you see my hat. I want people to know that I'm a funeral photographer. That's my first the genre that I want to specialize in. But again, there are other people out there that want to learn how to do it. And one of
Yeah.
my visions, one of my goals is to teach other photographers who are interested in doing it. And I don't have to be full time, just
Right.
how to do it and how to do it right. Like any other genre, weddings, portraits, um, any other, pet. I met a pet photographer. There's
Hmm.
baby photography. There's a way to do it right, and then for funeral photography, I want to be that person, one that teaches others how to do it right. And Ron, I want to be that photographer that people call on worldwide.
There you
World
go.
to
Speaking, that's a good way. How do people reach you? How do
well,
people reach you?
you can go to my website, which is www.your legacy photography, yourlegacyphotography.com. That's my website. Um, my number's up there, my email is up there, but those who are watching, my email is info at yourlegacyphotography.com. Info at yourlegacyphotography.com. And of course, if I can get my number out, they can call me at 917-520-7704. 917-520-7704. Even if you have a question about it, feel free to call me, and I'm more than happy to share what God has blessed me to learn in this genre. But if you know a family that needs me, when I was at WPPI, Ron, a couple of weeks ago,
Hmm.
I was excited about that, but something happened that I've always wanted to happen, and I believe it's the beginning of what I said about being called worldwide. I was ending WPPI on that Thursday, and I was supposed to fly home on that Friday. And somebody called me, a good friend of mine. We grew up together in the church that I started with in 1995. We grew up together. And he sends me a text. Dad just died. Dad passed away. I need you in Atlanta this weekend. just
Wow.
like,
Wow.
just, and I was like, I called him. He said, make it happen. I'm not, just make it happen. We need you here. And the family knew me. Number one, we grew up together. Number two, one of the brothers became a priest, and I shot a couple of his services when he became a priest, and when he went to his first church, all that kind of stuff. So they knew my work, and they knew the legacy books, and that's why the family called me. So I had to switch everything around. I went to Atlanta, shot a 2-day funeral, and I came back on that Saturday night. But those are the phone calls I want,
Mm.
when people, not just famous people, not just military, not just firemen, policemen, which I'm still dying to get into that genre of shooting our falling heroes. I want to get into that so bad, shooting falling heroes around the country, around the world. But famous people and just ordinary people, anybody that wants a funeral photographer, anybody that wants to remember their services, the legacy of their loved ones. Those are the
Hmm.
people I want to hear from.
Wow. Man, this was good. This was good. You gave us a lot of information, insight, and I am so thankful that you showed up and that you were like, "Hey, Ron, let's do this." And I was like, "Yes,
I was
yes."
glad. I was glad a couple weeks ago when we was talking about WPPI, and you said, Duane, I want to get you on my show, and I was like, Ron, I would be honored. I'm always honored when anybody calls me or to do an article or to do a show about funeral photographer. I like to share my gifts, my talents that God has given me to serve grieving families. So I'm always honored. And again, thank you, Ron, for making it possible for reaching out again. Our friendship goes back to the Container Store.
All the way as a customer. You were a
Yeah,
customer.
I was a customer at the Container Store, like you said. You was up on a ladder, and I said, "Excuse me." And
Can you help
you never
me?
know.
I need
You never
storage.
know how God will put people together. It's not by chance. I always say it's not by chance that you meet people. So always be kind and respectful for everybody. Because, like I said, like the lady I told you about, Miss Helen, you never know how you are to be used to impact their life. And I met her at a event, and I wound up shooting three. Not her mom, her dad, the husband's mom. Plus, I shot the daughter Sweet 16. I
Wow.
shot the 16. So, like I said, I do other events when people call upon me to do them. But the three genres that I want to travel the world doing is funerals, live concerts, and ordinations.
So, guys, if you enjoyed this conversation, first of all, like. If you're the first time here, subscribe, and also put some hands in there, some hand claps or some hearts. Let Duane know how much you appreciate this conversation. I know it's insightful. And
Man.
it was interesting that when he was talking about some of the things to do's and not to do, because of my connection with the family when I did the funeral photography, everything you said was what was in my head. Like, make sure you're at the right angle. Do not flash. Be respectful. Be respectful of
Yes.
the angles. Be respectful of the people. It's
Yes. Yes.
it's so much to think about.
Yeah.
But it's always the rule of thumb was always respect and
Yeah.
dignity.
Yes.
And that was
Yeah.
always my rule of thumb. Every time I went to a person, is this going to be respectful,
Right.
and was this going to keep dignity of the moment? You know,
And
and
speaking of
how would
speaking
it
of
feel if
respect,
I was in their place?
yeah, speaking of respectful, and I know we got to end. One of the things that you have to ask the family is, do they want pictures of the loved one in the casket? You
Yes,
have to ask that.
yes,
And I handle that in two ways. One, if they don't want pictures of the loved one in the casket, I don't put it in the book, the album, and I don't give it to them on a flash drive. But
right.
I learned, but I still take those pictures. I still take those pictures because I did a funeral once, and the family didn't want no pictures of the loved one in the casket, so I didn't take them. And so then months later, the family called me back and said, "I have an uncle that wants a picture of the loved one in the casket. Did you take one?" And I was like, I'll never do that again. So I still take it, but if the family don't want them, I don't give it to the family. But just in case somebody might call later on and want that picture, I do take it. I do take it. But again, you have to do it respectfully. You have to get your shots and not get in the way.
That's
You
right.
have to
That's
get your
right.
shots and not get in the way. And sometimes you have to get in the way, because people are not used to you being there.
Yes,
So, just as an example, a lot of time people stand around a casket and they block your shot. So you
yeah.
have to respectfully say, "Hey, can you just step over to the side?" You have to position yourself in the midst of everything. You can't do everything from the perimeter. You can't do that. You
Right.
have to
You
get
gotta get
there.
in. You gotta get in there.
Yeah.
You're documenting. You're a documentary
Thank
photographer. You're taking the
you.
information.
Documenting. As a photographer, that's what we do. When we do events, we are documenting history.
Yes.
And that's one of the things about that I'm sad about when it comes to funerals. When they're not shot, we're losing history. We're
Yeah.
losing history.
Well, brother, thank you so much.
You're
The
welcome.
photographers in the room are appreciating you, and I appreciate you. This was
Thank
absolutely insightful. This was wonderful. I cannot say I can't give you a big. I can give you a big hug across the screen. How about that?
Amen, amen. Let me just give a big shout out, Ron, to everybody that's listening. I appreciate you guys, even if I don't know you, but I have to give a shout out to all my friends and family that are listening. I saw my big brother Vincent, my sister Sharon, my mom. She's not feeling well. She's in the hospital right now, but she's listening. So
Yeah.
big shout out to mom and
Hi,
everybody
Mom.
that said that they was going to listen. Thank you for listening. You know my heart. Thank you. And thank everybody that tuned in. And please, if you have any questions, reach out to me. And Brother Ron, again, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for the opportunity to share what God has given me to do with great photographers like yourself and those you have interviewed already. Great photographers. And again, I say thank you and God continue to bless you.
Thank you, bro. Anyway, guys, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. And we are going to be out of here. So have a great day. Tomorrow tomorrow we have is Chris will be on and we'll be talking politics and all that other stuff. There's a whole lot of politics to talk about this week. So we'll be
Amen,
doing
amen.
that tomorrow. And so guys, again, thank you so much for joining us for this amazing conversation. I learned so much. And I know that you did too. So I'm out. We're out of here. Later.